Are we going to log in now? Yeah, I think we're good, yeah. He's on the door. Good evening. I call this Iowa City Community School Board meeting on Tuesday, June 11th, 2019 to order. My name is Janet Godwin, and I want to thank those in the audience, those watching on YouTube, and those following on Twitter for joining us tonight. One quick note, YouTube is experiencing technical difficulties, so we are currently recording the meeting. It is not currently live streaming. We'll post it as soon as we're able to, and I think we'll continue to try to get YouTube up and going from a streaming perspective, but I just wanted those folks, everyone to understand we're having some YouTube problems tonight. I'll introduce those at the table with me, starting at my right, Superintendent Steve Murley, Directors Ruthina Malone, Phil Hemingway, Lori Rotland. To my left, Paul Ressler, Sean Icestone, JP Clausen, and Kim Colvin, Recording Secretary. The public is reminded that if they wish to speak, they need to complete a speaker form found at the table in the lobby and turn it in. During community comment, persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district. All community comment directed at non-agenda items and agenda items shall take place at the beginning of the meeting during the community comment section of the agenda. And that is where we will turn and start with our student speakers. First up, we've got Diego Pacciotto Biggers, followed by Francesca Brown.
My name is Diego Biggers, and I'm going to be a senior at City High. About a month ago, Tim Dwight came to our school to give a solar teach-in that was attended by many students in front of our school. Our principal is here today, Mr. Bacon, and he's in full support of us and has agreed to have me and another student give a full-length presentation to the entire faculty of the school on climate change and how it can be inserted into the curriculum. He's also expressed a lot of interest in creating an AP class for environmental studies. We've been putting pressure on the school board relentlessly to follow through on a climate resolution for the past few months, including having, we had 2 die-ins at the office here and many weeks of striking every Friday. We don't really want to be here right now since it's the summer and we're trying to enjoy our summer, but we are here. And we're not here to try to shame anyone or to tell you that you're doing anything wrong, because we've already tried to do that. We're just here to say that we've done all of our homework and we've given you guys all the facts, and we know that you guys will make the right decision regarding the climate resolution that we have proposed.
Thank you, Diego. Francesca Brown, followed by William Irvine.
Hi, my name is Francesca Brown, and I'm a junior at City High School. Thanks to a 2015 Iowa Supreme Court decision, schools can now pursue third-party power purchase agreements for solar energy instead of purchasing these from larger monopoly companies such as Mid-American. So the way this works is the third-party developer owns and maintains the solar panels for about 10-ish years, and during that time we pay a monthly bill for the energy that they're providing us. And then after the 10 years are up, we can actually own and maintain those solar panels ourselves. This is something that some other districts nearby have done and other schools have done. For example, Crawfordsville actually turned to solar energy so that they could save money. And also Iowa Falls and Burlington have done this well. So this is something that we can actually get a return on our money for, because in the long run it will end up being cost effective.
Thank you very much,
you.
Francesca. William, followed by Satchel Cochran. Good evening.
Hello. My name's William Irvine. I'm going to be a senior next year at City High School, the school that leads, God bless. According to the EPA, in 2017, the United States released 6,457,000,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, 29% of that being emitted by the energy sector in our economy. It is our job as people of Earth and residents of City High to decrease these emissions, and City High has been given the perfect opportunity to provide renewable energy that doesn't rely on the release of carbon dioxide. Across the globe, cities and schools have begun to implement programs based on the IPCC standards in order to cut carbon emissions by 50% in the next 10 years. By adding solar panels to the roofs, it can only impact the world and our school in a positive way. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Satchel, followed by Garrett Fortis.
Hello, my name's Satchel, and I'm also going to be a senior at City High next year. Solar photovoltaic installers is the fastest growing job in America and is predicted to grow another 110% by 2026. The second highest growing job is wind turbine technicians. The point of high school is to prepare us for getting jobs and just being a part of society, and we have computer club and even a class for construction, but why don't we have a club or class for these jobs or relating to this, because it will be more useful since there's going to be more jobs and it's growing. Thank you.
Thank you, Satchel. Garrett, followed by Katja, Ellermeyer, and Estelle Ralston.
Hello. Nearly 6,000 U.S. schools are already using solar panels, and costs for solar panels are only getting cheaper. This is not just a trend, and clearly solar panels are a rising industry, and these schools are setting a precedent that we should all be following. Solar energy is clearly the way of the future, and the best thing that we can do to usher in important change is to follow the path that these schools have taken by getting solar panels and implementing climate change into the curriculum here in Iowa City. Thank you.
Thank you, Garrett. Katja and Estelle.
We are students going into 6th grade at Lincoln Elementary, a small school in the school district. I am Estelle Ralston.
And I'm Connie Ellermeyer.
And we are concerned about the district's usage of plastic utensils. All these plastics that we use are getting thrown into a landfill when they could be recycled or not even put into use at all.
Although single-use plastic is very convenient, it can make a drastic impact on our environment. Did you know that more than 700 species are affected by plastic? One of the major problems is single-use plastic does become smaller, but it never actually biodegrades. It just gets microscopic, killing tiny organisms.
Our class set up an experiment calculating the average amount of plastic silverware thrown away each day at lunch. We had students put their forks and spoons in a separate trash bag, and after the lunch period, we would count them. We did this for a week, and then we averaged the amount of silverware thrown away each day. After averaging these numbers, we brought them to our local recycling center.
In one day, our school has an average of 110 students that order lunch. With about 8,400 to 8,500 students who order lunch throughout the entire district, Lincoln has about 1/77th of the lunches ordered in the district. With Lincoln's average of 160 plastic utensils thrown away each day, and combined with 180 school days in the school year, the district as a whole throws away around 2,217,600 plastic silverware pieces each year, and this doesn't even include breakfast.
We need to stop wasting so much single-use plastic. To do so, we could use biodegradable silverware, metal silverware, or even recycle our current ones. Although the cost is much more upfront to buy metal silverware, after 1 year it could be saving us thousands of dollars. As for the biodegradable plastic, it is more expensive than our current utensils, but all these options are worth the cost because it will make a wonderful impact on our environment.
Our use of plastic utensils needs to be changed for the better. We ask you to direct your staff into looking into eliminating single-use plastic from our lunchrooms and to report back to the board in our class. Thank you.
Followed by Massimo Biggers.
Hello, my name is Alex Au, and I'm gonna be a freshman at City High School. And today, it's up to you guys to make sure we can have a livable future in Iowa City, and maybe inspire other people around the world to also create a livable future. Our climate is slowly depleting, and every day, and we need to be the ones to take a stand and inspire everyone else to do so as well. And solar energy will help to build our future and inspire everyone else to come together and build a livable future. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm very excited to hear you discuss about the climate resolution tonight. And I went on a climate strike for nearly 3 months to hear this discussion tonight. All right, a year ago I spoke to the school board after I did a research project and asked you to consider solar schools. I think the need to reduce our carbon footprint is even more urgent. We are running out of time. All the scientists tell us that. Farmers know that. My rowing team on the river knows that. Every day there's a new headline in a newspaper on a climate breakdown. I hope you finally make a big step, towards climate action tonight. A climate resolution will send an important message to students, parents, and the community that you recognize the science about climate change, and you believe that climate action must be part of planning every student's future. A climate resolution will help schools to plan better, to have more courses on climate change, to make better decisions on recycling and composting, energy efficiency, and even cool programs like tree planting. There are a lot of solar companies that can help us find the best agreement that will save money and allow us to do our part. It's in your hands now. We have done as much as we can. I had to make up homework for 11 weeks. I hope you act tonight, not delay or postpone or bury this in a committee. I hope you give us some hope for our future tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Massimo. Thank all the students who came to speak tonight and who have been advocating for this for so much time. I do appreciate you coming and being present for the conversation tonight and your advocacy. Oh, I'm sorry, we've got one more student. Oh my gosh, I came in, that was the last one. Brandon Marker, I'm so sorry. And I got your name wrong, probably.
That's all right, it's not very legible. All right.
I'm sorry.
Thank you so much for the time to speak to you today. I am currently transitioning from Southeast Junior High up to City High School, going to be a freshman next year, and I am deeply concerned about climate change. I'm here to ask you to pass a climate resolution that creates more climate education courses in all of our schools and makes the Iowa City School District a leader in reducing the carbon footprint of its daily operations. In the last weeks alone, we have seen historic flooding in Iowa and heat waves in South and other countries. Climate change is happening now. We all know that. So we must deal with it now, not delay any reaction or action until it's too late. A major study was released last week that estimated 1 billion people will be displaced by climate change by the time I'm your age. Imagine 1 billion refugees. Scientists around the world have warned us that we must act quickly to reduce fossil fuels if we want to have an inhabitable planet, and we must quickly capture the carbon we have lost in our soils. One way to do that is bring solar energy and more energy efficiency to our schools. It's kind of strange that we still rely on coal for a lot of our energy, and unfortunately, there's not much we can do about that because the economic basis our country has developed around coal. A lot of students have done their homework and learned about power purchase agreements for our solar energy, which are agreements with solar companies that don't require a lot of upfront money. Many schools in Iowa have power purchase agreements for solar energy. In the process, these schools are saving money and saving the planet at the same time, and they're preparing their students for a clean energy job market. This is one area a climate resolution would give a new vision to our school operations, a clean energy vision. So please, act now. Don't delay. Please don't postpone any decisions. Our future depends on your actions. Pass a climate resolution tonight and make Iowa City a leader for the state. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And thank you again to the students and your advocates for coming. Next up, we've got Julie Van Dyke, followed by Mitch Meyer.
I'm upset about the OSHA report, and I'm wondering if that information was shared with all the board directors before it came out in the paper, or if they just found out about it afterwards. I'm concerned because I know of a lot of incidents at that school that involved what I would call harm, lasting harm to children who were subjected to bullying within the classroom, and I'm concerned about staffing, and that early on when Mr. Murley, I think it still is, moved to this office here, I had a conversation with him where he told me that he wanted to reduce the number of paras in the school district drastically, and that it was expensive, and I know that that's what I've seen. Staffing is awful. And when you have things like what happened at Penn with the OSHA, I have to say it's staffing and training. I'm upset, extremely upset, about something I suggest that you all listen to, an NPR report on Morning Edition on June 5th called Desperation and Broken Trust When Schools Restrain Students or Lock Them in Rooms. I would note that it involves a great deal about Fairfax County Public Schools and overlaps the period where Chase was there. They say they're revising their data from the several of the years that he was there. And I'm tying it in because overall my concern is about the 15-year-old girl, and I will not use her name, who committed suicide the Labor Day weekend, if I understood correctly, on Saturday, after you all voted to expel her. I have heard so much from people who knew her or their parents of people who knew her, and I'm concerned, as many parents have said they are, that the district handled her situation differently so that you could justify the SRO officers that you want to put in these schools. And whether it's true or not, that's the perception of many, many parents in this district right now. She was 12 years old and in 7th grade, and the first question that comes to my mind is, did she attend elementary school here? And did you put her in the seclusion boxes? Because I know what that does to kids, and I've seen what it does to kids. It causes PTSD. They're traumatized by it. My son and many other people's children are traumatized by what happened to them in the seclusion rooms in this district. Have you made them warm and welcoming yet? Did the district traumatize her? Was she violently taken down and thrown into those rooms? Where my son actually tried twice to commit suicide in one incident, and the para wasn't looking because he had his back to the door so he could hold the door down while my kid sat in there screaming that he wanted to die. Did she go through that? You better ask those questions. I can ask people, but you're the ones that need to ask those questions. As far as OSHA and what happened to her, I suggest that you listen to that report, because they say when seclusion, the NOWICI, the Government Accountability Office says when seclusion and restraint is inappropriately used, it can create some really dangerous situations, especially for some of our nation's most vulnerable children. I'm also extremely concerned that the principal of Southeast Junior High is married to the Iowa City Police Department investigator who was involved in all of her issues, and then they spoke to the media and this was reported. Is that a FERPA issue? I hope her parents get an ACLU lawyer immediately, because I have a feeling her civil rights have been violated. And she was definitely ADA, because we know that she was in therapy, and we know this district knew that, and we know that the reason she probably had knives with her a lot of the times was because she was a cutter. So don't pretend you didn't know, but you better ask the questions about whether she was in those rooms and what this district did before you expelled her that may have actually contributed to her lack of trust and to her suicide. You know what? It's on this district how they handle that entire thing.
Thank you, Julie.
It's just unforgivable. It makes me sick.
Next
Kill
up-
one of them. How many more of them are going to die that came out of those rooms?
Next up, we've got Mitch, followed by Kelly Larson.
Thank you for the opportunity to address you this evening. My name is Mitch Meese, and I'm here this evening to speak in support of school resource officers being added to the secondary schools of the Iowa City Community School District. While there are many reasons that I support the introduction of school resource officers into the district schools, I will focus on only 3 here this evening. I believe that school resource officers are necessary for the following reasons. Number 1, the safety of our students and staff should be the number 1 priority of this board. 2, our educators should be focused on teaching. And 3, school resource officers can play a key role in the identification, intervention, and resolution of problems facing troubled young people today. As a parent of 4 children in the district, I am placing my trust in this board to keep them safe while they are at school. This body has the power to make our schools safer, and they have used that power in recent years to increase security measures such as secured and controlled access points at district facilities. But more can and should be done to provide an additional layer of security in the form of school resource officers. The schools and the students and teachers who use them deserve the same level of focus on security as do many of our government buildings. Effective education can only occur in a safe and welcoming environment. There is nothing more valuable to the parents of this district than their children, and it is time that this board recognized and took action to reflect this reality. Second, I believe we need our teachers and school administrators focused on the task of teaching our children. The staffs at our district schools are incredible, and they do outstanding work day in and day out. But these professionals signed up to educate the students of this community. They did not sign on to perform roles that are better suited for well-trained school resource officers. Providing our secondary schools with professionals who are trained to specialize in dealing with the challenges our schools face, including mental health issues, violence, bullying, weapons, and drugs, seems like a reasonable and easy decision to make. Lastly, school resource officers can assist administrators and teachers in providing threat assessments of serious issues before they escalate. On a national level, school resource officers are recognized not only by federal law enforcement agencies, but also professional medical groups such as the American Psychological Association as being critical to the assessment of risks facing schools and providing assistance in determining what action, if any, is necessary. That is not to say this results in more arrests of young people, but rather provides an important alternative path towards getting the help that at-risk students may require. In fact, over a almost 20-year period beginning in the early 1990s, as the number of school resource officers in this country increased, the number of juvenile arrests dropped almost 50%. School resource officers are a solution to problems that our schools are experiencing and can contribute in a positive and constructive way by assisting those students who need help in getting it. In conclusion, I hope that tonight's meeting is not the end, but rather the beginning of a dialogue that we in this community have on ways that we can make sure that all students in this district feel safe and welcomed at school. For those students who need additional help, let's provide more avenues for them to be identified and supported in getting the help that they require. I believe that well-trained school resource officers are an important part of doing just that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mitch. Kelly Larson, followed by Sarah Cross.
Hello, I'm Kelly Larson, and I'm just here to speak in favor of SROs as well. I just, in reading the newspapers and such and hearing that initially it sounded as though the school board was not in favor, I just needed to come and show my support. The teachers and the administrators that I've spoken to sound as though they feel that their schools would be greatly helped if they had a student resource officer there. It would alleviate their time so that they could focus more on instruction and doing their administrative work. You know, I agree with, you know, the West High principal, Greg Schultz, when, you know, if there is a negative stereotype against police officers and certain students, I think we definitely need to address that and confront that, but the answer is not to keep police officers away from students. Looking at the Cedar Rapids School District example, they've been partnering with the police department for nearly a decade, and it sounds as though those police officers have become integral and beloved members of their school district. So I think that's a great example, and it also, from what I've learned, I believe every other 4A school in the state has SROs. So I think if we look at these examples and we see that they're becoming positive parts of the school districts around us, I think that, as Mitch said, this needs to hopefully be the beginning of a conversation and not the end. And just on a personal note, I have 3 children in the school district, elementary school, junior high, and high school. And you know, the day that I had to decide whether or not to send my child to school because there was a threat, whether it was you know, credible or not credible, it was a very scary day and a very frustrating reality that I know that everybody faces on a daily basis. And I just am hopeful that we can all work together in a very positive way and not, you know, turn this into a political or other sort of issue. And yeah, so thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Sarah Cross, followed by Jenny Mitchell.
The Safety Advisory Committee came up with 8 recommendations, and I do support all 8 of them, not only because this credible and diverse committee came up with them, but because I believe they contribute to the safety of all of our children. However, I do know that I'm limited from having all the experiences that other people have had, so I've had conversations with people and try to understand their thoughts and feelings. I've talked to many people, including Brad Kelly, who is the liaison between staff and students at Southeast, Laura Cottrell, Director of Diversity of Cultural Responsiveness, Kate Callahan, Secondary Principals, Iowa City Police Chief, board members, and other community members. All these individuals have different experiences, cultural backgrounds, and roles in our community. These individuals have educated me, and some even gave me suggestions that could help more people to be open to SROs and the protection they can offer to every single one of our students. First of all, the federal government, Parkland, Sandy Hook, all recommend an SRO to be a critical member of a threat assessment team. This team would also consist of administrators and counselors. It's important to have an SRO on the team because they are best suited to determine if a threat is viable. According to a national survey that I've passed along to the board, nearly 6% of high school students admitted to bringing a weapon to school in the past 30 days. That is a lot of weapons. Some reasons why an SRO is best to assess threats is he or she can stop a criminal act, gather additional information such as phone records, assess a situation, manage, prevent violence, monitor social media, and ongoing situations. An SRO would have access to a school database that would help him or her determine if a child is acting up at school, perhaps because of something happening at home. Our district doesn't have the manpower to properly assess all the threats coming in. An SRO would have time to devote to this and to this properly and to be proactive. Secondly, an administrator would only call an SRO to help for serious offenses, for breaking the law and violent behavior. This is the same protocol we use now for calling law enforcement. At the smaller fistfights, the discipline issues would continue to be handled by the administrators. An SRO would work for the school district and would ask the administrator what she would like him or her to do on the scene. An SRO would have a positive relationship with the students, would have their trust, would know the teachers, know the school, and be consistent with the students. It's unfair right now to our students when one officer handles a situation a certain way and then another officer comes in and handles the same situation a different way. The SRO would handle things differently than a regular officer. The state of Iowa is looked at as a model for its diversion program. The SRO would look at alternatives to charging someone with a crime. Perhaps have a child write a paper, do community service work, or be placed in a diversion program. This helps to correct a child's behavior during their formidable years. Perhaps the SRO would even work with the entire family. The SRO would be an educator. Any classes regarding safety would be taught or overseen by him or her. There are quite a few trainings that will be rolled out, such as Say Something. As the students are trained to report concerns, these concerns will increase in number, and someone needs to be able to properly assess this growing number of reported threats. And the SRO would also be a mentor counselor for the students. The SRO would connect with the students and get to the root of why they are doing something. If it is because they don't have enough food at home, this would be handled differently. The SRO would also be a bridge to community resources. Students with SROs often tell them when they need help outside of school. The SRO would be focused on building a positive and trustworthy relationship with students and their families, as the SRO would have extensive training on how one negative impact with a person could ruin a person's relationship with police forever. The SRO would care about each student as a whole, would have extensive training in implicit bias, cultural diversity, juveniles, investigations, counseling, the education process, youth psych, reactions, etc. At this time, there's only one police officer trained in juveniles in the Iowa City Police Department. What happens if that officer is gone or working on another case? Ms. Pat Anderson says Mr. Chan, an SRO in Cedar Rapids, is someone our school board should meet with. She said he is not just a regular law enforcer in their schools. He is able to connect with kids. He is someone kids to look up to and can talk to them about their issues, and he is specially trained to work with kids. I hope we can listen to one another tonight and make our schools safer for every single child.
Thank you, Sarah. Jenny, followed by Mary Kenyon.
Hi, my name is Jenny Mitchell, and I reached out to the school board and members of the Iowa City Community School District Administration before. I will reintroduce myself as someone who is a lifelong Iowa City resident. I graduated from City High School and also the University of Iowa. I'm married to a lifelong Iowa City resident, and we have 3 children that are currently in schools in Iowa City. I have a son that's at City High, a son that's at Southeast Junior High, and a daughter at Shimmick Elementary. We love Iowa City and its schools, and that is why we chose to remain here. But most importantly, we love our family and the safety of our children, and every child that they attend school with is important to us. When I say every child, I mean every child, no matter what their race is, their mental health, or their gender. It frustrates me that I even have to be concerned that I may be accused of being biased, racist, or misinformed about my concern for the safety of all kids in our schools. There's a group of us concerned parents that have spent many hours over the last month or so doing research, speaking with teachers, administrators, law enforcement, and other members of the community, including those who may have children and grandchildren of a different race, gender, or mental health. It is my understanding that during the past school year, our schools have dealt with an increased number of behavioral disruptions, mental health issues, and criminal-type behavior in our schools, specifically at the secondary level. This has caused our teachers and administrators to be pulled away from educating our kids. It has also caused an increase in the number of times per week that law enforcement has had to be called to the schools. After all the discussions and research, there seems to be one overwhelming common denominator, and that is the support of having school resource officers in our secondary schools. We understand that the SRO is a member of the police force, but is one that is specifically trained to work in schools with adolescents. They need to be someone that our kids feel is approachable, comfortable with, will listen to them, and be trustworthy. An SRO officer will also help educate our kids on what to do in various scenarios, such as drug awareness, constitutional rights, bullying, sexual harassment, cybercrime prevention and safety, drug abuse resistance education, also known as DARE, lockdown drills, and alert, lockdown, inform, counter, evacuate training, also known as ALICE, for staff. I hope that the board has taken all of our research and information provided into consideration. I am encouraged to know that there will be a workshop following this meeting between administrators, law enforcement, and the board. I hope that you will reach out to communities that currently have SROs in their schools, specifically Cedar Rapids, and get information from them when making your final decisions. Thank you again for all you do for our students, school, and community, and thank you for taking the time to listen.
Thank you, Jenny. Mary Kenyon, followed by Jennifer Arturo.
Good evening, I'm Mary Kenyon. I'm a parent of students at Lucas and Southeast. I am here to say that if you are truly committed to reversing disproportionate discipline of students of color in our district and improving the climate for students of color who say they do not feel safe and welcome in our schools, then you simply cannot be in favor of assigning school resource officers in our schools. These are mutually exclusive propositions. A uniformed law officer does not engender feelings of comfort and safety for all of our students. This is not an indictment of any individual officer or even law enforcement as a whole. It merely says that we must acknowledge the racial climate in which we all live and believe the perspectives of those whose lived experience may differ from our own. I appreciate the work of the Safety Committee, thank them for their time. I welcome the recommendations for universal mental health screenings, increased school community partnerships with mental health providers, increased school nurses, counselors, social workers, others to address the real needs of our students. But the recommendation to add SROs to our schools sticks out like a sore thumb in its absolute tone deafness to the needs of our students and the climates of our schools. I wrote you back in April when this report was first delivered and discussed that I believe the discussion of SROs is fatally flawed if it does not include significant participation by and representation of parents of students of color and parents of students with disabilities, specifically mental illness and or behavioral challenges. This committee did not meet that standard in its membership. In an April article just before this report was first presented to the board, the Cedar Rapids Gazette reported that area schools with SROs have higher numbers of police reports. Even if these reports are not ultimately coded as arrests, they are part of a student's file. Another interaction with law enforcement may then be escalated as a second or subsequent offense. Our schools should not be in the business of establishing criminal histories for our students. Moreover, there's little evidence that SROs in schools actually make them safer. A 2018 study by Dr. Kenneth Alonzo Anderson, Associate Dean for Research at the Howard University School of Education, showed no association between SROs and a reduction in what he termed reported infractions. This refers to disciplinary action in categories that must be reported to the state. He studied a North Carolina program that provided grants for matching funds to place SROs in middle schools and found that it was not associated with reductions in those reported interactions. On the other hand, his research showed that overall lower enrollment and increased grade level proficiency were associated with reductions in reported acts. You want safer schools? Direct your resources toward the students, not the police. I have sent you all a link to this study if you care to dig into the data. I don't have time in my 4 minutes. I believe all of you when you say how committed you are to increasing proficiency in this district, and especially to reducing the proficiency gap between white students and students of color. I have seen you allocate resources and celebrate successes. That is a critical goal for our district. We also want our schools to be safe and welcoming spaces for all of our students and staff. Great news, Dr. Anderson's study tells us that your work on the former will contribute to the latter. I ask you tonight to keep your focus on the students, their academic, social, emotional, and human needs. Don't be distracted from your goals by a non-solution that actually works against your interests and those of your students. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Jennifer Arturo, followed by Becky Hall.
My name is Jennifer Arturo, and I have two children that go to North Central Junior High. Both of my children attended Penn Elementary throughout their entire elementary education. I want to speak to you and the community about the Penn OSHA violation. I want to share with the community some experiences that my daughter had as a nonviolent autistic student at Penn and my experiences as her parent. I want to say first that the violence that's happening at Penn is not just happening to the staff. My child, over the course of her education at Penn, was shoved, had her feet stepped on, had scissors cut the back of her neck. One of the biggest incidents she had, she was punched in the face. The next thing I want to say in regards to the violence is the culture at Penn is a bullying culture. And in my experience, I believe it comes from the principal who set the tone for that culture. Regularly, when we would report incidents coming from peers and from staff, we were invalidated, we were minimized, we were gaslighted in what happened to us, and nothing ever got done. Another thing I'd like the community to know about Penn Elementary is that supports are often blocked for children who need them there. My own daughter, who finally got her diagnosis at 9 years old, had an IEP blocked the entire time she was at Penn. She did receive a 504 plan, which was not followed and resented by staff members, openly resented by staff members. I've spoken with other parents. Just this weekend, I ran into a mom at the North Liberty garage sales whose son is a 2E student and who is also being blocked from an IEP. As I was saying before, the supports are not being followed. When my daughter had a 504 plan, those accommodations were often not followed, which caused her harm and sometimes trauma. I just heard of another friend whose disabled child has an IEP at Penn, and they're trying to get out of that school because the IEP is not being followed. My daughter experienced lots of discrimination by staff. Last year, when she was in 6th grade, she was stimming, which is fidgeting, on World Autism Day, and her 6th grade teacher decided to shame her in front of the entire class for stimming and had them come to a vote if she was being an annoying child and disrupting the class. Another student in that same teacher's class was told to go and die by one of the students. This was all reported. That teacher did nothing, and then the following week that student self-harmed in the class. She sent him out of the room, and then she proceeded to tell the class that he was doing it for attention. All of these incidents greatly traumatized my daughter and me. One thing I do want to say about Penn is that isolation and seclusion boxes were used there, and my daughter heard screams from that SC room every week from the children being put in those boxes. And the final thing I want to say is that I really believe that the students of color were greatly discriminated at Penn. In one incident where a student of color was not friends with my daughter, she got in trouble and she was harshly disciplined, whereas the boy who punched my daughter in the face hardly got a slap on the wrist. So that's what's going on at Penn, and you guys need to dig deeper. Instead of just looking at the staff and what's happening to the staff, you need to look at what's happening to the kids in that school. And they don't need police officers. They need their supports, and they need to be treated with dignity and respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Becky Hall, followed by Craig Mosier.
I'm Becky Hall, lifelong resident of Iowa City and City High graduate. You have a very important job. As we can see, you hold the future of the generations in your hands. You have safety issues you're dealing with, curriculum issues you're dealing with, funding issues, fairness, but we're asking you to also think about sustainability. And we're not asking, you have your plates full. We're not asking you to do this all yourself, to reinvent the wheel, because there are experts out there that can help you do this. And you also look at other school districts that are already doing sustainable schools. I think we brought it up before, East Dubuque. They're saving $32,000 a year. Maybe you could pay a half-time energy expert to do that job for you. Iowa Falls and Waco school districts are also using sustainable energy, and I'm sure there are more in Iowa. You've done such a good job of teaching in this district that the kids are waking up and they're asking questions, and in science classes, and they're listening and reading. As you can see, they've done a great job, but they feel like they're not being listened to, and we all know what that's like. It's hard when they see inaction and they know there's a problem that has solutions that actually are win-win solutions. At the city council meeting, I went to watch them present, and it was heartbreaking because some of them are really anxious about their future. I mean, truly anxious, and that's hard to see in our young children. In Oregon, just yesterday, in the courts was the Children's Trust, Juliana against the United States, and the judge ruled criminal neglect to the United States. That was his response, criminal neglect for not acting, for leaving these children. That violates their Fifth Amendment, right to life, property, and equal protection under the law. So, I mean, they have legitimate reasons to be concerned. I guess I want to say in closing, let's see, it would be, you probably have all read their, what they've asked for, their action resolution. If you haven't, please read that, because they've done a great job on it. And their asks are not anything out of line. I mean, they're all great. So please read that. And in closing, I don't know if you saw the Press Citizen today, but they did get to meet with the mayor, Throgmorton. Maybe Superintendent Murley, you'd like to be on the front page, and you could invite the students to meet with you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Craig Mosier.
Hello, I'm Craig Mosier. I live at Iowa City Co-Housing over on the west side, where we're building 36 homes that are all electric and super energy efficient. I'm here on behalf of 100 Grannies, and I would like to also mention that I'm working with a new organization in Iowa City called the Johnson Clean Energy District, and we're working to make energy efficiency more a part of our residential housing stock. So I support these brave students. I think it's just wonderful to see young people up here fighting for a livable future, and I really am inspired by your dedication and your eloquence. Good work. So I'd like to quickly mention 3 of the issues that they highlighted. One is we should be putting solar PV on all of our district buildings as soon as we can possibly afford to do that. The economics work these days. We should be electrifying our school bus fleet, and we should be increasing the climate science in the curriculum so students know how to work with these issues. So a couple of other issues more specifically. As you probably are well familiar, the 4th National Climate Assessment came out from the federal government back in November. Their conclusions for the Midwest were that we're going to experience adverse health effects from higher extreme temperatures, higher humidity, and more rain, and also decreases in air and water quality. So another study just recently says that the Iowa City, Cedar Rapids area, in 60 years, the average temperature is going to be 4.5 to 9 degrees higher Fahrenheit than it is today, okay? Average temperature. What does this mean for the school district? Air conditioning, air conditioning, air conditioning, right? So this is an opportunity for the school district to move forward and consider replacing aging furnaces and air conditioning units with much more efficient heat pumps and geothermal and whatever seems to make the most sense, but heat pumps are very efficient these days and very cost effective. We have heat pumps at co-housing, and my electric bill is about $35 or $40 a month, average, for a one-bedroom unit. That's not a bad deal. So, let's see. I'd also like to talk about energy efficiency a little bit. I've spoken with an architect works in this area, and the concern was that the school district has an opportunity to more carefully document the energy use in each building by specific categories, and then making energy efficiency improvements and measuring those so they can give you some measurements of the effectiveness of these steps so that you can be guided by data in your decision making. So I think you could call for that kind of reporting from your staff and be able to make stronger decisions. Let me give you one example. I retired recently from teaching up at Luther College, and I've got 5 grandkids in the system here, so I'm a local guy, but at Luther, we borrowed $7 million from our utility to do energy efficiency and heating and air conditioning retrofits. And we did that throughout the campus and dropped our energy use significantly. We paid off that loan in 3 years. That was almost $2 million a year that after that 3-year period went into the budget. This is doable. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you all for your comments tonight. We'll move into our next part of the agenda where we will approve our agenda for this evening. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Consent agenda. Phil, do you want to report on bills, please?
Yes. We had $10 million, $10.7 million worth of expenditures. 6.6 million were out of the 31 account, the Go Bond. I know Ruthina had some very good questions when she reviewed the bills. I had a chance to get in and look at the bills as well. My concern again is with the Terracon contract and the cost of that and how that whole contract got set up. But other than that, everything, questions that I had were answered. And I can't speak for Ruthina, but if there was something you wanted to put in, both of us went through and looked over them. So.
Great. Thank you, Phil and Ruthina. Any items to pull from consent agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with Directors Rutland, Ressler, Godwin, Clausen, Malone, and Eystone voting yea, and Director Hemingway voting nay.
Thank you. Up to the presentations. First up is the annual asset protection report. Is that Leslie?
Yes, it is. The documents are presented in your board packet, but I would like to talk about one thing briefly. You'll notice that our property casualty costs are going up rather significantly. We are a member of the IPSIP, which is a cooperative group of 26 districts in the state of Iowa. Our Gallagher is our insurance administrator. They went out to 58 different reinsurance carriers to cover our plan. And they were only able to get back 8 responses that were considered reasonable. You're going to say, well, why didn't they get better responses or more responses? The market has changed significantly over the last 3 years due to the many natural disasters. When they started the process around the first of the year, they were getting fairly good responses from the companies. As soon as the floods hit on the western part of the state, they had approximately a dozen companies pull out and say, we're not covering anybody in Iowa. It's like the whole state was underwater. A couple weeks later, the Davenport flood story hit the news. Another dozen or 15 pulled out of the marketplace for even consideration to do that, again, thinking that the state of Iowa is underwater. These companies are no longer looking at past records for property coverages. They're looking at future trends and predictions. They're now using modeling that predicts the future of natural disasters. Iowa has been moved into Tornado Alley and Hail Alley. Many of you experienced that just a couple weeks ago at the West High graduation, being exposed to that threat. As soon as those sirens go on, my concern for our district buildings goes sky high about what that's going to do for not only for serving our students, but from the risk protection aspect. So they were able to get us back a quote with the increases that are there. This is a phenomenon that you're probably going to see across a lot of schools and municipalities across the country. The last 20 years, natural disasters have been running 20 to 30 billion per year in the United States. In 2017, they jumped to 144 billion. That's when many of the wildfires were under and the hurricanes hit. The next year, they were around 80 billion. This year through April, we're already at over $40 billion of natural disasters in the United States. So the market has changed. We're going to continue to see this. We will continue to budget for this and plan for this through the management fund, which is where our property and casualty is funded from under Iowa code. But I just wanted to alert you to that change in the market and how it impacts us moving forward, not only for this renewal cycle, but hopefully in that. And you know, when you're shopping at 58 different places for something, you should be able to find the best buy when you're working that hard at it, and you only get 8 viable alternatives to the program. When you have as much coverage as we do, it tells you what the market is.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Leslie, in the comparison document?
Yes.
I'm not calculating things properly tonight, I think. I'm wondering, it shows that we've got a $345,000 increase from the 2018-19 year to the 2019-20 year. But if you look at the totals for 2018-19, 2.4 million, and the proposed amount for 19-20, 3+ million, that's more than 345.
I think the formula captured the difference between 17-18 and 18-19 versus 18-19 and
600-something thousand difference.
You're correct.
Okay.
You're correct. It should be the 600,000 number.
Yeah.
Thank you, Janet.
So, did we budget for that when we were going through our budgeting for this next school year?
We had budgeted for some increase, not this much, but we do have fund balance in a management fund that will support this, and we do carry that fund balance just for this reason, because
Okay.
renewals come in after we have to certify the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Is this something that's going to make us kind of go back to management fund next year and tack a little more on that? I can't imagine it's going to stay flat.
No,
this is huge.
The Gallagher team has already shared with our executive group that they will continue to work with the reinsurance carriers to look at the market and get us information as soon as possible. Because of the market being what it is, the carriers will not give the quotes out until the last minute, and so we have to do an estimate for our management fund to certify by that April 15th. So JP, we will be addressing and looking at maybe over-guessing our increases next year just to make sure that we are safe.
What is considered excess property? Because that number really stands out there.
Are you looking at,
Well, I'm looking at a 333% increase is what I'm looking at, but it's on the line excess property, and I don't know what that means.
It's on the comparison
yeah,
sheet.
on the first line is kind of what's considered your basic package, and then excess property is those limits, those higher reinsurance limits to cover the tornado or catastrophic coverages that you would have on the property for the pool.
So where does that, like Sean said, that, you know, from 1819, 113,000 to 1920, 491,000. So what's that?
That's all those reinsurance carriers bumping up that.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We were told that there were some districts that were actually, they were denied coverage by the other primary carrier in the state, you know, with less than 60 days to find coverage, and they're mandated by law to have the coverage. And
Tough.
So they had to find a new agent or a new company to work with, and the district had been working with somebody for years, so it's a bad place to be.
You know, it is, and there's, it kind of stems from the conversation a lot of our community commenters have. I mean, it's real, and this insurance companies know it, and it's happening, and we're paying for it.
Yep, and we'll continue to, sounds like, yeah.
The positive news that I can share is, though, in the insurance coverages for our benefits, there's no increases for next year for health, dental, life, and vision. So those have all remained flat. So on a more personal note, that impacts our families and our staff. That's good news.
Yep, thanks for highlighting that. That is good news. Any other comments or questions for Leslie on the asset protection? Thank you. We'll move to the next presentation, which is our Grant Elementary update.
So just an update for you. You get those weekly feedback forms from FRK and from Bi-State. They continue to remain on schedule. Dwayne and I are going to go out there and take a look at the facility again tomorrow. We had our interior is proceeding apace. As you know, we had a little bit of rain here the last couple weeks, so obviously that sets back some of our groundwork a little bit, but that's all part of the process that we're planning with Ken Turnus as they look to move in there.
Yeah, I'm a little worried about Unit C. I mean, we've still got 42% in progress. I mean, I'm hearing we're on track and all of that. It's just a heck of a lot of work to get done. It's June 11th. We've got a lot of work to do. Looking for just an additional sense of confidence here.
Well, I was out there last Thursday. I was out there again this morning. I'm going out again tomorrow. And I can tell you that they're making great progress beyond what you see on that chart.
Okay.
The ceiling grids are going up in Unit C as we speak, which is a good sign, which means they've turned the corner and they're starting to trim rooms out. They've been painted. You know, the carpenters are hanging doors and cabinets out there. The terrazzo started going down today. And even the concrete that Steve alluded to, they were grading it and setting forms today. They're going to start paving tomorrow. So they're making real progress out there in the last week, and I feel pretty good about it.
Because we've sort of passed the point of no return, yes?
We
Okay.
are. We have, and I think we've turned the corner, doubting that it will be done. For me, anyway, I've
Okay.
turned that corner,
Okay.
and it's a question of, you know, when we're going to be done. Is it going to be
And
August?
how hard you're gonna have to
1st
work
or
to get
August
there.
10th?
Wait a second. It's going to be done.
Oh, it's going to be done, but is it going to be
done on time? That's the question.
It will be done on time, but will it be done August 1st or August 10th? When can I move the furniture in, August 2nd or August 11th?
Got it.
That's the issue for us, okay?
Okay.
Furniture's ready to go, and everybody's lined up, and it's going to be clockwork at the end, but we'll make it.
How about outdoor spaces, playgrounds, outdoor spaces and playgrounds?
Yeah, they told me this morning that there would be green sod in front of the building, you know, that we'll have that part done. The back part is going to be seeded, and really the seed shouldn't be put down until August or September. So there's going to be a lot of dirt out there. There's some concrete areas around those playgrounds. Those are going in, and I think we're pretty close to having the equipment. The equipment for the playground may be just before school starts or the week or two after. So, I mean, it's going to be very close. I can't say that they'll be 100% ready. But there will be some hard surface areas for them to go outside.
Okay. Any other questions from directors? Thank you, Dwayne and Steve, and thanks for everyone working so hard on that. Next up, we've got discussion items. First up is the sustainability climate change resolutions.
And I just want to point out here, for the sake of our students, a number of you asked us if we were going to take action tonight, and you would like us to do that. I just want to point out that this is a discussion item, that this is our process, is that we usually have a discussion at the board table and then we vote at a different board meeting. So I just want you to be aware that it's not that we're ignoring your requests for action. This is just our process.
So the first item on the agenda to talk about tonight is the climate change resolution. I've had some, I shared that Madison proposal that was shared with us at one of the last work sessions with our municipal partners. I've got very affirmative response from Johnson County and Iowa City. They've already taken some actions and are looking at reframing some of the work they're doing that's more in line with this. I think that's a plus for us as a district, so that we can look at it collectively as a community as a whole, not just the school district. And I think if you look at that Madison resolution, you can see many of the things in there that are reflected in the comments that we've received from community members over the last few weeks. And I think it gives us a platform by which, as a district, we can begin to move forward to work on both the energy issues inside the district and our facilities components as we look to plan, especially ahead for future building, remodeling, and renovation. So I don't want to go into it too long, but I hope you've had a chance to review that Madison proposal and take a look at that and how it might impact us as a district.
Yeah, I've reviewed it. I've looked at all of them. I certainly am leaning much more strongly personally to the proposals that have stronger action noted in them with measurable outcomes. Some of them are just sort of like, oh, we're going to go tell our legislators, and that's not quite enough. I feel like we need to have stronger statements. I think the Madison one I like the one that came from the students and Jeff. I think there's one thing that, there's a couple things that I think we need to discuss. I want to make sure that this isn't just a on-the-shelf document. I want to make sure that we hold ourselves accountable for taking action around the things that are in this resolution. I know from some other districts that they did pass a resolution and then they didn't do anything. And then they came back up 3 years later, hey, what are you guys doing? So one thing I was thinking about adding an item as an item in the resolution around the board getting an update annually on the progress to hitting our sustainability goals, so that at once a year, maybe in the fall, and I'm thinking maybe fall, before we've locked in our curriculum catalog for the year, how have we made progress? What have we done? What additional curriculum have we added? What additional reductions in our emissions have we managed to achieve? What have we stood up solar panels in the school or whatever? But I think we need to make sure we've got the ongoing visibility and accountability to move towards hitting these sustainability goals. So I just thought maybe that could be an item we would add to the resolution.
And I think as you look at some of the items that are in there, I think that there would be a more frequent dialogue and work at the board table during the first year.
Yeah.
One of the things you'll see on our agenda to talk about is carbon footprint. I think, and not to get ahead of myself, but we've had some conversations with you and I about having that carbon footprint measured. I think as we go through that process, I think it would be important for the board to hear A, about the process, and B, then the results when they're out there, because if the intent is to make a reduction of 50%, from what? So I think it would be good for the board and the community to know what that is, because, Janet, to your point, I think then we know at where we are today, where we plan to be as we move forward. That gives you the opportunity to measure progress towards that outcome, which could then be done on an annual basis. But I think in the short term, I think we'd need a lot more discussion at the table as we go through it, just to make sure that the board can see that process unfold and understand where we're at with it and what our next steps are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's something that was getting me when we were having the work session discussion, is 50% of what, we have to know what that initial number is before we can, or I mean, it's good to know, and then you have a way of measuring it. Although one way we could measure that is cut 50% of the parking stalls in our school parking lots. And then that way you could cut your carbon footprint by 50% very quickly. So save some money too.
Might not stop the students from driving and just
Well,
parking
but
in the neighborhoods, though.
That's on them. And this is a community thing. One thing I just wanted to throw in on the whole climate. There's some in the Madison, and I agree with some of the comments already. That Madison resolution starts off with "This is not binding," and okay, it's very easy to agree to something that has no teeth to it. But there is some for getting past that. There is some things in there. There's some things in the proposal from the students that is very good. There's some of it I have a little trouble with, but I think on the whole it's very good. I've been going through some onboarding with my new employer, our Connie down in Davenport. They have a 136-acre building under one roof. They're the largest manufacturer of aluminum in the world, and they have a climate policy. And they have a CO2 gas emissions policy. And they have a 2030 zero landfill policy, which they are was in a presentation for an hour and a half today, which my daughter led some of the conversation. And it's amazing what some in the business world are doing. And they look at it as when we get more efficient, we cut costs, we're more profitable. And we should have that same view that depending on how you are politically, that if we can save money, that just means we can do more things with our curriculum, we can do more things with our students, and we have that opportunity. And a benefit of the cleaner air, cleaner water is what we all want as well. So I applaud the students and their tenacity and holding our feet to the fire and being out there, although I'd like to have seen you in school more. But I understand what you were doing to draw our attention to it and that. But I think that, yeah, this is there needs to be progress.
I also was, I mentioned at the last work session that we do need a resolution that has numbers to it. Like whatever that concrete number we're going to land on needs to be there. And I was struggling with wrapping my head around, okay, how do you measure it as a percent reduction type of thing without totally discounting all of the work that has already been done? Because I know there has been a lot of work putting in geothermal and high efficiency lighting and all of these other things to help, right, up to this point. So to say that, you know, we're starting at ground zero, I don't think is fair. I do like the language that's in, this must be Madison's, that's instead of saying a reduction, it's talking about 50%, the way it's read is 50% of all district operations energy needs will be powered by renewable energy by a date, and 75%. So going from where we're at now and increasing how much renewable energy we, like that's an easier number for me to wrap my head around, and probably an easier thing to measure maybe as to how well you're doing against whatever goals you're going to do if you're doing it from that way, because it kind of gives you a ground zero that doesn't discount everything you've done before, right? It's getting to the point where you're using renewable energies for everything. So that type of language makes more sense to me. And the other thing I think the curriculum piece that has been brought up quite a bit, I think needs to be a pretty big factor in whatever we're going to have as a resolution and steps past that. I think that we've had several instances where we've been trying to get curriculum into the schools that our students are really wanting, right? And it's a process, right? And so I think if we do it right, like get it in the resolution, actually go through the curriculum process and follow all those steps, I think we can have a good, robust curriculum in there. But I think we've got to make sure that we're putting it in there as that's a step we want to take. But yeah, it's got to have numbers, but I like the way the Madison one is set up. It's just easier for my brain to work around.
Yes.
Well, and on the curriculum part, you're absolutely right. And the ironic thing is when at the same time the students were talking about they wanted the curriculum, when you looked at that ag program that was offered, the example in the student handbook was a experiment into alternative energy sources. And, and in many of the statements, it talks about, the importance of agriculture being a part of the total solution and like I've advocated FFA, the opportunities for students to have a local, state, and national forum for discussion for that would be excellent. So I think we just have to, for one thing, we just have to follow through and make sure that ag is part of the curriculum going forward, because there are parts of that fit right into what the students want.
Just want to touch on curriculum real quick. I know Ruthina and I both were able to get over to Southeast Junior High for their Regenerative Iowa City Showcase, which some of these students actually presented at, and it was the program through the 8th grade Castle project, and that was really I think I went through 6 stations, and every station had about 4 or 5 students there, and they were all very engaged in climate change and all the things that you guys were talking about. It was really good experience there, and I think the students really learned a lot, and they were all very informative in learning it. So I think there's some stuff there that we can build off of as well.
And I remembered I had one more thing I was going to mention, and I forgot it, but we had a couple students today, and I got a couple letters here kind of talking about recycling, and I think that, or reducing plastic use and things of that nature. I think that can also be part of the whole program, or needs to be part of the whole program. I don't think we can just solely focus on the energy consumption at a school and have it be a total process, because all of those things come into play. So I think we need to make sure we put that in there as well.
Sustainability, yeah, that whole.
And so this is, for me, one question I want to just pose to the board. I'm sensing we're all very much in favor of passing a resolution. I know we're not voting on anything tonight, but I'm sensing very, very, very strong support for this. And so I want our folks in the audience to hear that and recognize that. I don't think we're going to wordsmith the actual resolution tonight. However, if we can give some direction in terms of what we want to see in it, then we at the next meeting, maybe we can make this an action item, the last meeting in June, and actually pass a resolution. I get that we may not have all of our baseline data yet in terms of our carbon footprint so that we can put those hard numbers in, but I would challenge us to word it in such a way so that we could get a resolution passed, so that there's enough specificity driving the actions that would drive the collection of the data and putting our plans in place, that kind of thing. I would love for us to see us pass something at our next board meeting. For me, some of the topics that have just come up, like the food service stuff, that's included in the one from the students and Jeff Biggers. It talks about climate-friendly food service, increased plant-based and lower. So if we blended some of the things from Jeff's proposal with some of the things that I think are in the Madison proposal, putting those things together, and then with my one request to put in this, the board must at least annually get a report on progress toward meeting our goals. I think we could do some wordsmithing offline, present a proposal at our next board meeting and pass it.
I agree, Janet, and it feels like that's the way the conversation's going. I too like what you just mentioned about kind of the combination, because I think the single-use plastic thing is critical. The stuff just doesn't ever go away. And I'll say, I just want to commend the students and Mr. Bacon for supporting his students tonight. Tonight it was just Lincoln, Southeast, and City. I know there's students all over the district, but I will say City is living its motto tonight, and students have really taken the lead on this, and I'm proud of them. They did a great job. I will comment, though, just a little tip for democracy. Your work here is probably been more effective than the strikes. I'm all for banging pots and pans and bringing attention, but this is going to move a governmental body, and someday, maybe in a couple of years, you could sit here, right? You can run and be a part of this and drive this train. Obviously, we deal with more, we're not a single issue body, but clearly you folks have the skills. and you've got the passion, and this is where you guys can make a big difference. And I really want to emphasize, let's get the thing going, but the work has to start right away. If we're going to do purchase power agreements, if we're going to talk about a plan to get rid of single-use plastic, there's going to be some years there, but it can start right away. So
that sort of speaks to the
Which
carbon
leads right
footprint.
into the next one.
Go ahead. That links to the next two, the carbon footprint and the alternative energy sources on the carbon footprint. I think the ask is for the board to say, district, go get a carbon footprint baseline for the district.
And I'll give you just a quick update on that. So UNI, which I think many of you are familiar with, we worked with them on our playground issues. They have obviously a robust Center for Energy and Environmental Ed up there. The platform that they use is one that's used throughout the country for municipalities to take a look at their carbon footprint. That's something that they do as a service to the state, so that's something that we could engage them to come down here to the district and begin that process. And I would agree with you that it's not waiting till we pass the resolution to do that, but actually getting that process moving now. Although, Sean, it wouldn't necessarily be required for us to go through, because like you said, that process talks about the commitment to renewable energy as part of our source. But I think one of the things that we know is that if we use less energy, obviously it's easier for us to meet that metric of more of it through renewable resources. So this will give us an idea of where we're using energy and where those opportunities are. I know Dwayne and his team have done a great job with installing geothermal and energy efficient windows and LED lighting and things like that. This would give us an idea of where that's been successful and where there's still areas for improvement for us. So we think this would be a good opportunity for us to get that process moving and to really better help us understand with 30 facilities in the district, where are our high points, where are our low points, where are our quick areas for success.
Do it. How long does that take?
I did not get a time estimate from them on that.
I would just say that as we do decrease our overall usage, right, and if we go with the language of, reducing or increasing our percent of renewable energy sources, right, 50% of a smaller number is a smaller number, right? That makes that need less. Right. So you can, because we know solar, as, that was the big topic tonight, it's not going to work at every one of our schools. It's just not. So you have to be thoughtful about that. And so what else can help reduce those numbers? So then when you want to get on a renewable energy source, you're not trying to cover it all or cover the same amount. To that end, I think our last speaker said we need to look at things that we have done and seen the trend, like what we've affected. And is that something we can go back and say, all right, this school before it was remodeled and now has, geothermal, whatever else, and
we talked
really
about
look
doing
at
that.
the difference?
We've already started that. I hope to present a preliminary report to you at the next meeting. One of our mechanical engineers had some interns working this summer from Iowa State, University of Iowa, and UNI, and I asked that they'd be interested in helping us develop that report on the improvements we made on the first 17 projects. It's almost done, and we've been editing it and making some improvements to the report, but I think you'll see that at the next meeting. So what that does is it will tell you how much energy has already been saved at the first 17 completed projects. Some of them are new buildings, some are remodels, some are additions, so there's a variety. And I think it will surprise you when you see the results that we've already made.
Well, and don't we get reports from Mid-America on our renovations and things already? So.
Actually, there's a report that we get from it's called the White Group, and it's paid for by Mid-American and Alliant and others, Lynn County RC. And what they do is they make recommendations to us on improvements to HVAC equipment controls, lighting controls, windows, all those things. And so we go through there and pick the ones that are affordable for us to do that make economic sense. Then they come back and actually verify that we've done it. And to date, we've garnered almost $1.8 million in rebates from the utility companies for the improvements that we've made, in addition to saving on the average almost 50% in their energy bills in those 17 buildings. So you're going to get all that.
I'd like to think that we're going to see a result in the pocketbook at some point, right? Like as we, well,
Well-
at some point now,
Yeah.
right? That we're really spending less because we're.
What I read today was that we've already saved, these engineers' projections in the last, since we've done these 17 projects, is $994,000 per year in savings, in addition to the rebates that we've earned. So
Fantastic.
I think we're doing pretty well.
Great. So I think, I don't know, Lori might have something to say, but I feel like we're all in agreement that we need to move forward, but the next step is actually having something wordsmith. So either Steve and his team is going to do that, or we're going to have someone like our policy and governance team or someone do it. And I know Sean was just talking about how he was missing meetings during the summer, so I don't know if we need to have another meeting before that.
Well, I heard the student report, the Madison report, annual reporting, recycling, and sustainability and curriculum as additional clauses to add to that. So if you want to, we'd be happy to try to take a stab at merging some of those and bring them back to you as soon as the 25th, just for review.
And thinking about bringing that into alignment with what the county and city are doing as well. I mean, I think that the more we're kind of in this together.
I have theirs. There is virtual zero crossover at this point between the language that they used.
Maybe we just have to come up with a better model.
I suggested maybe we could all draft one together. Timing seemed like an issue for that, so I said we might be moving forth on our own and trying to reconcile with them as we move forward.
Okay, understood.
And North Liberty and Coralville don't have anything yet.
Okay. We'll be the district that leads there.
But there is language in the student proposal around advocacy, nonpartisan with local, federal, state, right? You know, I mean, I think we could put some language in like that, that we're going to focus on building a larger group of support. Did you have comments, Lori?
Yeah, so this is just a rah-rah comment, but I just want to say that I'm just really excited about our kids. I'm excited that we've got kids here that are advocating for this. Yesterday I was at the grocery store, and the high school grocery store clerk and I were having a conversation about plastic bags and how they were killing fish in the ocean. And my daughter came home this year and wanted us to compost, and they did a composting project in her school, and we had kids from Lincoln here talking about plastic silverware. We had kids another night talking about food waste. We may not have the structure around the curriculum that you guys are looking for, but our kids are leading the way on this, and I'm just really excited about it. I think the kids are going to be the change as we move forward in this world for this particular topic, and I'm really excited about all the work you guys have put forth.
Just one comment. Steve, if there's additional help you guys need, I'm more than happy to volunteer, because after going to the Castle 8th grade project, I mean, I was happy to say that I was educated. So I walked away with some information that I was able to share with my family. So if you want board help to help wordsmith, and if
Volunteer
other people are
too.
okay, I'm more than happy to make sure that we get moving so we can come back next meeting and put this in action.
Absolutely. So then, the next item on the agenda is actually, again, moving forward while we are still doing those other pieces there. And some of the things that we know we need, I had a great meeting with one of the area solar providers, and one of the things that is required if you're going to do any solar is to have an independent engineer's analysis of your rooftop. We already work with Shive Hattery to do our rooftop life cycle process. They are equipped to do a rooftop survey for us. We would like to engage them to do that, so that they can come in and look at everything from load bearing to membranes that we use for the weather-tight exterior that we have up there. So that's all part of that process that's required, at least by the city of Iowa City, if you're going to do anything like that. So we would like to do that.
Go do.
Then from a ground survey standpoint, in speaking with them, there are certainly areas of property that are better suited to solar than others. So we would need a ground survey done where they could come out and look at all 30 properties and give us an idea of which might be best suitable to solar. I initially suggested we go out and do an RFQ for that. I was told that we may be able to get that for free, which is a good thing. Then, in terms of solar options, once we get that ground survey done, we know that one of the things that we'll hear from them is what may be more effective are stationary arrays or rotating arrays, and I'll just jump forward a minute down the legal issues. Some of our municipalities don't allow some types of arrays, and so it would be good to understand what types of arrays can work in different municipalities, since we work with 5 different municipalities for our 30 properties. I know we've talked a lot about solar, but if you're driving up and down I-80, you know that there are lots of wind turbines out there. I've got experience putting wind turbines up on school district property. I think it's at least something that we ought to make sure that we take into consideration as another form of alternative energy. And obviously, there are 2 types of those wind turbines, the big ones you see down there on I-80 as you're driving along, and also smaller, they call them residential units, but they can also be for use on school district property. I think it'd be appropriate for us to take a look at those. I already mentioned the local ordinance issues. We've started looking into some of the contract issues, things like those power purchase agreements, so we can make sure that we can give you some good advice on that. And then reaching way out, one of the things that we've talked about, Craig and I have had long conversations about this, is as we start planning for our facility master plan 2.0 and the next one, looking at what types of requirements we might like to have for rooftops for new facilities or rooftops for renovated facilities that would make sure that they are prepared for solar installations as we move forward with that process. And then finally, the last one down there is the cost and financing options. So once we better understand the pieces up above there, do we want to own the solar cells themselves, or do we want to work through a power purchase agreement, and what the various options for us might be. So these are the things that we have identified, at least as of right now, are things that we think you as a board need to know in order to make good, intelligent decisions moving forward. We'd like to get started with this process. We're just looking for the green light from you to begin this.
Yeah, I mean, I know you can get your assessment on solar free. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's free anyway, right? They'll come tell you which ones are going to be good, and even kind of look at how much you're going to be able to save. Do you know, is there something like that for wind?
I don't know that yet. We haven't reached out to them yet. We do know Kirkwood Community College has a turbine on their campus, so I had some preliminary discussions with them. So we haven't gotten too far down the road with that. I know we've talked a lot about solar, but I also just wanted to raise the wind issue, something I thought we ought to take a look at too. It may be that,
Especially for some sites where the solar is
Yeah.
not going to be as conducive, right?
with my experience with it, I'll tell you, one of the issues may be our airport, because there is a flightway that is actually wider than the runway itself, if you think about that. So I'm not sure if the flightway in Iowa City will actually allow commercial wind turbines in our campuses, at least in the Iowa City area, but we thought that we ought to at least look into that so you know whether or not it's an option.
So we've talked multiple times now about wanting this information on solar, and multiple times we've asked to have it given to us, and you have the green light, I think. I think we've already given that. Could we put a time frame on it so that there's clarity from us and from the community on when we will get that information?
Now that we know that you're good with us doing that, we'll definitely be able to bring you back a timeline with it. So we'll reach out to, for instance, the rooftop survey. We'll have to work with Shive Hattery, and we'll get a date from them, and so then we can report that back to you. And I think we can bring back with each of these some kind of timelines as we get to the next meeting, so that you know when to expect the information on that.
One other thing, I might just think it would be helpful to get that information too, and I don't want to rain on the parade, but there's been some changes with California's solar mandates because of the toxicity of some of the collectors and things like that. So I'm just curious to make sure that we're using materials that aren't going to pose a waste down the road when we have to recycle them, and an excessive cost that way, that we're good to the environment, not only when they're functioning, but when we have to, when their useful life is gone.
Yeah, we can look into that.
Okay, any further comments on this? So next meeting, we'll get into agenda setting.
We'll attach some dates to these and bring
Yep,
that back
and
in.
we'll cover what we want to see in the next meeting in agenda setting, so. Thank you. Action items. We have 2, transfer appeal number 1. And I think our stance is to take no action. And that would also apply to the second transfer appeal.
I think consistency is important here.
I think so too. Okay, so no action on those 2 action items. Next up is the director liaison report. Anything folks want to update, provide some additional commentary on?
I did meet, it's on there, that I met with a representative from Moxie Solar, myself, partially because my wife and I have been talking about doing it at our house, but also just to kind of get a little bit of idea. And to be perfectly honest, we spent most of the time talking about my house and what we could do, and I'm putting solar on my house for anybody who cares. But we did talk a little bit about, you know, what they could do, and it sounds like a very similar process, and just I'll give you a very quick rundown because you don't need to hear it anymore from me, but they gave me, basically, they came out and looked at my house. They did a lot of it through satellite, right? And they said, it looks like you can put this many panels on there, and this many panels will give you this much energy, and they can look up, you know what your average energy use is, and they've got information from, like, I don't know, it's like the weather service or something that'll give you an idea of how much energy you're going to get in, and they give you a whole cost rundown and give you an estimated return on investment. And that's, flat out buying it. I think an upfront cost for a school district would be tough. So I think that's why we kind of got to look at the power purchase agreements. That's a whole different ballgame than just buying it outright. But it was nice to even hear, well, that side of your house won't work. And at first, even the south side of my house, it didn't look like it was going to work because the house next door kind of shades it a little bit. So it wasn't in my head what I thought would be the perfect place to put stuff. So it was just kind of nice to get a rundown like that. And I think it would be very beneficial for us to get that information that we just talked about, to at least have an idea of what is good, what's a good location for that kind of stuff. So
It's good. Anything?
I just wanted to touch on, especially since most of the secondary principals are here. We all went to, 5 graduations in the last couple weeks here. They all have their own traditions. They're all excellent and have their own way of doing things, and they're all different, and it's great. Just for Mr. Schultz out there, I would prefer not to have to do the tornado drill as a tradition there. And it was fun to be with all those people in close proximity, but it was really hot. But kudos to you guys for pulling that off with the number of students that you guys do, and having them all come through. It was great.
That's great. Anything else? All right, agenda setting for our meeting on the 25th. I think we would like to have an action item on the climate action resolution. And I know we don't typically do discussions at the second meeting, do we, or presentations, but I think an update, Steve, on what we were just discussing, some of the timeline information in terms of all that information gathering would be super helpful. Yeah? What else? Anything else folks would like to add to the agenda next meeting?
We have Pearl on there, so just a reminder that the plan was to bring forward the... We have Pearl on there, so just a reminder, we've got the language for the Pearl resolution for you to consider.
Okay.
This is just a parking lot item, because I wouldn't expect it to be ready for the next meeting, but since we're getting questions about class sizes and our weighted resource allocation model, I think it was around this time last year where we received some information about that in terms of how it has impacted our outcomes. And I'm wondering if it would be possible to get that kind of a report sometime over the summer before school starts to talk about the efficacy of that program, of the weighted resource allocation model.
Okay, anything else? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Favor? Aye.